Magnus Carlsen. We all know him. He gives off this certain effect when he walks into the room. When you play him, you don't quite play like yourself. And I think this game is going to go and show that. In this game, he's playing against Alireza Firuza, one of the best in the world. And let's see just how he pokes and prods against them. So it starts off with the Sicilian defense. Very standard. We get some sort of con setup. And Alireza does this double fianchetto because he has to win this game to stay in the match. And we get this trade in the center. Everything develops as standard. They're just developing their pieces and getting castled. So this is, I think, a good starting point to really start analyzing the game. Here, Alireza goes knight a4. And as you can tell, it seems like Magnus is likely out of preparation by now. He's already down to 8 minutes and 22 seconds, while Alireza is still at 14:06. This knight a4 move, I'm assuming, is intended to apply pressure to this pawn and this square so the queen can't move. So Magnus takes in the center, Alireza takes, and now bishop to g4, standard, just attacking the queen and getting the bishop onto a good square. This is the first move where I think the Magnus effect really kicks in. Instead of moving his queen or playing a move like f3, he instead plays knight e2, which is super passive and laid back, and you're also allowing a pin onto yourself, which isn't always the worst thing, but in this situation it definitely is. So now Magnus just continues as standard, rook e8. Now Alireza plays f3, but this begs the question, if you're going to play f3 here, why not play it here? Instead of moving the knight back, you could have just saved the tempo. Magnus goes back. Alireza continues to develop. b5. Now Magnus is pushing forward as black. You know that's always a scary situation. Knight goes back. He brings his rook in. And now this, just what a nice find by Magnus. Bishop a3. Possibly trying to sneak into the b2 square and also preventing the move a4 in the future. Play continues rook b1, stopping the bishop to b2 idea, knight b4, and rook e1. As you can tell, the eval just plummeted. It's now negative 3.4, which means the computer thinks it's fully winning for Magnus Carlsen. And here, Magnus goes h5, which the computer doesn't like, but personally I do. It has the very obvious plan of going for an attack on the king. And when you're down to 6 minutes on the clock, you kind of want obvious plans. So Alireza continues with queen d2. Magnus spots a tactic with knight takes on c2, the queen takes, and now b4, because the knight is pinned by the rook to the queen. So he goes queen d3 and gives the knight back, and it's now just worse. Play continues bishop to b4 because the bishop is no longer needed on a3. Bishop d4, so they're once again rerouting pieces and getting them back into the game. Queen a5. This knight. There's a tactic here, a very small one. If white does nothing, black will take this knight and then win this pawn. So Alireza doesn't defend that. Maybe I'm crazy, but that looks good to me. Yeah, and Magnus played it. So now h3. Look at this pawn structure. He moved every pawn forward here by one square. That's kind of funny. And now Magnus continued queen takes b3. just taking all of the pawns, because why not? Bring up 2 pawns is a nice thing. And now g4 by Aloesa. Another move that, actually, I think this is kind of in the character of Aloesa. He likes attacking. He doesn't seem to really enjoy being attacked very much. So I guess this does fit his style. But I do wonder if he would have tried to defend this position a bit harder against another GM around his strength. But since it was against Magnus, he just thought Magnus would convert an endgame. Now Magnus goes queen to c4, trying to trade queens into that winning endgame. Aloesa declines. d4, just sacrificing a pawn with the idea of bishop takes, queen here, forcing that queen trade into a winning endgame. At least what he probably thought was a winning endgame. And don't forget, all Magnus needed here, I'm pretty sure, was a draw to win the whole match. So for him, a draw is a win, which must be scary for Aloesa. Now rook c2, pinning the bishop to the king. Rook e7. There is a tactic here, another tactic. Bishop takes, followed then by pawn takes and rook takes bishop. That was the threat. So Magnus went bishop e5. There's a threat here. These people just know how to make threats every move. This bishop, if white does nothing, is going to be lost. So he goes rook e1 to stop that threat. Now knight d5. Bishop e5. Everything just hangs at such a thread. f6. Bishop d6. Knight e3. The computer labels this a blunder and says it lets white have the chance at equality. But I trust in Magnus to convert this position. Bishop takes c3, and this bishop f1 idea. Magnus spotted a tactic and he liked it. Fair enough. Now king g3, rook takes, and king f4. The computer, I believe, thinks this is a draw because one pawn in certain king and rook endgames is not enough to win. And also, this position has opposite colored bishops, which is notoriously drawn. Even sometimes if one of the people are up 2 pawns, it can be a draw. So, rook d2, bishop c5, rook d5, rook e8, king h7, moving forward, bishop f8, trying to come in and create threats, g5, king g3. And this is just Magnus doing Magnus things, just grinding out an endgame. The computer says it is equal, Magnus doesn't care. Rook d2, f4, h4, just moving his pawns forward, king f3, and finally, he wins a pawn. He just cleanly wins a pawn, and it is blundered, actually. Rook d2, the computer says Magnus blundered. Rook e1 and f3, apparently this was the wrong way to convert. But they were both on low time here, and Aloesa messes up big soon. He gave a check, king g8. And here, it looks like Magnus just loses a rook, but his pawns are so far forward that it doesn't matter. f2, and here Aloesa made this big mistake of g5, just allowing the queen promotion, and there goes g6. I think he thought he had a mate here, is my guess, or he at least had the threat of mate, but he was surely mistaken, or his time got so low, he may have mouse slipped. But queen f2, king d3, and Magnus went the Magnus effect, just making 2700s, almost 2800s look like just another amateur like me and you. Hope you guys enjoyed this video.